Welcome to Raptors Recon. This is my inaugural video, and I figured before hitting up some reviews I would like to do something fun. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, but Rian Johnson kills both Luke Skywalker and Snoke physically, as well as their characters' legacies. Today, we tackle the Herculean task of how to bring back both Luke Skywalker and Snoke in Episode 9. For those who haven't been following it, The Last Jedi is hands down the most divisive Star Wars movie in the franchise. As of this video, it boasts a 47% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes, over 100,000 signatures on Change.org to strike it from canon, has seen it removed from Chinese theaters in only 2 weeks, and has generated hours upon hours of negative social media traffic. Rather than dissecting the flaws of The Last Jedi, I want to focus on how to explain and fix some of the glaring issues that director Rian Johnson caused in this film. I will start with some of the rationales that I think were missing for certain aspects of the movie, and then move on to how to actually bring back the villain and the hero for a grand finale that us fans would enjoy, of course within the framework of Episodes 7 and 8. This is an open dialogue, and I look forward to your comments and suggestions. With that, let's begin. When I think back to The Last Jedi, one of the biggest things that bothered me was the treatment of Luke Skywalker. He just didn't seem in character for pretty much any part of the movie. Mark Hamill did an exemplary job bringing passion and emotion to the role, but even he called this character Jake Skywalker because it was not the Luke Skywalker that he knew. One of the biggest situations was the encounter between Luke and Ben Solo in the hut. I know you all know that infamous scene. You see Luke walking into that area with a sleeping Ben Solo, lightsaber in hand as if he's going to kill him. Now that's troubling enough, but here is how I see that rationally playing out. Let's say Luke has been having visions of Ben's dark future, but more recently he's actually seen examples of it during training. Perhaps earlier that day, during a lightsaber duel against a more physically talented student, Ben Solo is actually defeated and at the other student's mercy. When other students begin to comment about the teacher's pet being one-upped, Ben unleashes a surge of force power, knocking his opponent to the ground. As he does this, he grabs his lightsaber and goes to strike him, only to be thwarted by Luke Skywalker himself. Though initially Ben takes some strikes at Master Luke, who eventually talks Ben down. Humiliated, Ben skips dinner and goes off to the hut to sleep. Luke can feel Ben struggling with the dark side the entire time, and can feel just how much he wants to strike Luke down in anger. Visions continue to plague Master Luke the rest of the afternoon and evening. It weighs heavy on his heart, but he knows he needs to talk to Ben. However, he is uncertain of just how dangerously tainted Ben Solo is. He struggles internally against thoughts of having to possibly take down a relative, though that is the last thing that he would want to do. He decides instead to enter the hut with his lightsaber drawn for self-defense only, because he is unsure of how Ben will react after the volatile situation that day. As he enters the hut, he begins to use his Jedi far-seeing ability to continue to probe the future for answers, searching for any kind of redeemable chance in Ben's future. He pushes his far-seeing to the limits, and it's then, at that moment, that he sees Ben Solo as Kylo Ren, standing on the platform with Han Solo. And Luke watches as Kylo Ren kills his best friend. Now, that Force image is so powerful and visceral that Luke can't help himself. And almost as a reaction, a reflexive reaction, he activates his lightsaber in response. This activation is what wakes Ben Solo up, who misinterprets this as The Last Jedi reveals in the end, that he thinks Luke is there to kill him, to murder him, and then he brings down the roof on Luke's head and eventually then escapes, destroys the Jedi Temple, and murders many of the students. Now, for me, that's a little easier to digest because it's not saying that Luke went in there purposely to kill him. Rather, he went in there prepared for a reaction. And then as he's probing and he's searching for something redeemable for his nephew, he sees that vision of his best friend getting murdered by his nephew's own hand. And that shock and trauma causes the lightsaber to ignite. To me, that's a little bit more reasonable and more in line with the Luke Skywalker that we know. Now, continuing in that same vein, the Luke that we know would feel utter despair at this point because he knows he has to do something to right this wrong. Obviously, he's going to feel extreme guilt at even thinking that even the thought crossed his mind that he might have to kill his nephew. And he carries that burden with him, that he also might have been the catalyst that Snoke was hoping for to turn Ben into Kylo Ren. He's faced with that fact that just that whole misunderstanding and that whole situation may have been just enough to push Ben over the edge, just as Snoke was planning. However, Master Skywalker has not given up hope, and he begins to search for answers and wisdom to help him bring back Ben from the dark side of the Force. Through research and meditation in the Force, Luke discovers the location of the first Jedi Temple on Ahch-To. Still clinging on to hope, he creates and hides 2 map fragments of his whereabouts in the event that the New Republic or the galaxy at large needed him. His intent continues to be a focused effort on the task of redeeming Ben and ridding him of the influence of Snoke without killing his nephew. That's his goal. His goal is to try and find a way to save Ben and stop Snoke without having to kill his nephew. Months upon months go by as he studies the Jedi texts that he discovers. He learns new Force secrets and wisdom in the process. However, the one thing he wants most, to save Ben, seems to continually evade him. Master Luke even reaches out to the former Jedi Masters Qui-Gon Jinn, Yoda, Obi-Wan, and even his father for help. Qui-Gon Jinn had rediscovered the means to become a Force ghost, so how could it not be that the Masters of the Force might discover something groundbreaking to help him in his quest? The group of Masters would learn how to affect the physical realm from the other side of the veil as Force ghosts, and Luke saw this as progress. This revelation altered his perception of the possible and redoubled his efforts into finding a means to save his nephew. In the meantime, Snoke is mentoring Kylo Ren more directly in the ways of the dark side of the Force. He plots and schemes of ways to draw out his enemy, Master Luke Skywalker, so that he can rid himself of the biggest threat to his rise to power. You know, his plans for Starkiller Base were meant to deal with the Republic, but he knew that there would always be a risk if Luke Skywalker remained alive. His control over Kylo Ren was strong, but the bond between Ben Solo and Luke Skywalker, as well as between Ben Solo and Han and Leia, were even more powerful. This is why Snoke made such a concerted effort to push Kylo to rid himself of his weakness. And those weaknesses, what were they? They were the killing of his parents. It's also why he created the Force bond between Kylo and Rey. He wanted to use that bond to not only to continue to push Kylo further down the dark path, but also as a means to possibly draw out Luke Skywalker, or to find Luke's location. Everything seemed to go off as planned, just like he envisioned it, with some discrepancies, leading Snoke to be extremely overconfident in that fateful confrontation with Rey and Kylo. He was so sure that his apprentice would kill Rey that it wasn't until the very last second that he realized what was about to happen. Almost instinctively, he had to reach into the depths of his dark side knowledge for a solution. Now Snoke would call upon the dark side teaching of essence transfer. This technique allowed the user to transfer their consciousness into another body or even an inanimate object. It was a means for Sith Lords to cheat death over and over again. It's a significant contrast to note that Sith cling to the lives that waste away through the use of the dark side, while in contrast the Jedi seek to transfer peacefully into the Force when their time has come. Anyway, many Sith use this technique. This is something that was in previous canon, and some of the previous characters that use this are still in our canon, aka Darth Bane. Okay, but there was other users as well. You had Seth Harth, Exar Kun, and even the Emperor, Darth Sidious, used essence transfer in various forms. You could even use this if you go back and play the pen and paper Star Wars Saga role-playing game. For those of us who played that, you can use essence transfer if you had a dark side character. So just think of this as a means for a Sith Lord to possess the body of another person. I believe that Snoke used this technique to escape the unexpected death at the hands of Kylo Ren. He rips his spirit from his body, and my theory is that he inhabits the body of General Hux. Snoke's anger at his betrayal and what his apprentice did to him, it almost gets the better of him, as seen in The Last Jedi when General Hux pulls out a blaster as if to kill Kylo Ren while he lays unconscious on the ground. Snoke gathers himself, however, as Kylo comes to and chooses to play along, seeing what happens in his quote-unquote absence. All the while, Snoke is planning for the appropriate time to reveal himself and exact his revenge. Now, having this take place to save Snoke in no way changes The Last Jedi. It only opens up possibilities for Episode 9. So now I shifted to Snoke for a moment because the ability of essence transfer was widely used in previous canon, as I said. Also, remember that Darth Bane and Darth Sidious are still canon, so it's very plausible that essence transfer could remain a viable use of the dark side. Drawing upon the theme of the movies of duality and balance that the new directors are hammering home is where I contrast essence transfer with what will save Luke. Because if you think about it, for every good, there is a bad. For every Kylo, there is a Rey to balance the Force. So I thought to myself, why couldn't that also be true for Force powers? This is where we return a little bit in the past to Jedi Master Luke on Ahch-To. Through his study of the Jedi texts, meditation on the Force, and communion with the former Jedi Masters, he eventually gets a powerful vision. This vision is revealed to him alone, and it is so jarring that he cannot believe what he sees. When calling upon the Force for a solution for the redemption of Kylo Ren and the defeat of Snoke, the Force shows Luke and Leia standing on either side of the veil between the spiritual realm of the Force and the physical realm. Leia tells Luke in this vision that he is the only one who can save her son. She has seen that clearly through her own visions, and she tells him to search his feelings as he knows that this is true. Leia tells him that he cannot run away from destiny, and he proceeds to watch in both horror and amazement as she gives up her life force to rip Luke back through the veil into the realm of the living. When the exchange is complete, Luke tries to call out for her, but he feels empty, as if the other half of himself is all at once gone. That chilling feeling of losing his twin sister in a way that feels like he is losing himself It causes him to retch as he shakes free of the vision. That jarring vision of Leia sacrificing herself to bring him back, it frankly disgusts him. He just can't take it. Now, this ability can be called whatever you like, but at its core, it would be the light side version of essence transfer. This is where a powerful light side force user who has an equally strong bond with another force user can willfully sacrifice themselves to the force to bring the other one back. It's not meant to be used to bring back random force ghosts or to bring back mere acquaintances, but only a single exchange, one for the other, in moments that the force itself deems necessary to maintain the balance. This would only work on someone who has willingly given themselves to the force, and the bond between the two are much like the bond between master and Padawan. So you couldn't basically just have random force sensitive people trying to bring back ancient spirits and such, because that's not the purpose. The purpose is part of the will of the force, and it has to be a very strong bond for this to work. Now, getting back to not only the physical part of Luke that got affected, but it was also his legacy and his character that just didn't seem right. So if we take this vision, right, and you kind of think of how Luke would react, I think that Luke would see this vision, and it's like that final straw that breaks the camel's back with regards to the Jedi religion. This is where, this is where he really now starts to call into question everything that he held dear. Because he's asking himself, was the light side of the Force really telling him that the only way to save his nephew was to die and then have his sister sacrifice herself to bring him back? Was that the only viable solution that thousands of years of Jedi knowledge offered him? It was that thought that he couldn't accept. He just couldn't accept that. How could this be the only solution? The mere thought itself repulsed him so much that he truly believed that the Jedi should end with him. Why should Leia die and he live to save a murderous and power-mongering nephew? How could it be that Ben Solo's own mother wouldn't be the one to redeem her son? Why would he be the one to redeem her son, his nephew? Or for that matter, that she would not be present to witness the return of her son to the light, at least as far as he knew. It just made no sense to him. Luke always thought of Leia as the better half of himself. She was a natural leader, intelligent, strong, and what he believed the Republic and later the Resistance would rally around to secure a peaceful future. Her love for the Republic was only eclipsed by her love for her son Ben and the rest of her family. In despair, Luke loses hope for himself and the Jedi. Master Luke would be master no more, and he would therefore cut himself off from the Force to prevent himself from easily being found, while he just remained exiled as a hermit on that island. What Luke didn't count on was that the vision was so strong, the one that he just had, it was so strong that his twin sister Leia had it as well. Now, seeing this vision and knowing what it meant, Leia redoubles her efforts to try and find Luke. That is the crux and the impetus behind The Force Awakens. The galaxy needed Luke Skywalker, and more personally, Leia needed Luke to save her son Ben from what he was becoming under the influence of Snoke. The quest to find Luke Skywalker became the focus for the Resistance. Leia also realized that her vision of Luke redeeming her son would never come to fruition if she died. So, in her mind, her self-preservation was important, both actively and at a subconscious level. She believed that if she died prematurely, Leia wouldn't be able to bring her brother back because of that vision. Now, we see this transpire in The Last Jedi, and that was specifically in the scene where the bridge was blown up. Okay? So we see that powerful need for survival when instinctively Leia draws upon the Force and prevents her own death in the vacuum of space. It is a mother's love and the will of the Force that protects her, keeping the Skywalker destiny on track. So it wasn't just some random Force power, some random use. It was basically her love for her son, her desire to redeem him, and to be part of the solution that, through the will of the Force, she was able to survive and bring herself back. Now, that it was extreme. That's why she was in a coma. That use of the Force, it took its toll, but she needed to live so that way her son can be redeemed. Okay, so now we kind of get back to the present time during The Last Jedi. Basically, when Rey lands on Ahch-To and finds a broken down shadow of the man who saved the galaxy from the two most evil and powerful Sith Lords in power at the time. Now, as you guys have seen, Luke refuses to teach her, having cut himself off from the Force, and refuses to follow the path that was envisioned before him. He didn't want to go down that path where his vision said he needed to go. He didn't want to take his sister down that path at all. And he frankly was disgusted at even thinking about that as a solution, or that being presented through the Force. Now, his self-loathing solidifies as he asks where Han is, and when he goes into the Millennium Falcon to face what he knows now must be true. Ben, as Kylo Ren, must have done exactly what caused him to ignite his lightsaber in that hut. That instinctive anger on that fateful night in the hut. It came to pass. Feeling like he's riding a roller coaster of emotions without a means to escape its rails, Luke does everything he can to alter his course and the path set before him. And what does he do? Instead of following his destiny, following the vision, coming to his friend's aid, Luke digs in deeper. Not even the revelation of his sister Leia's plight and that of the Republic bring him to help. Even that does not bring him to help, because he does not want to be in the position that he saw in that vision. Instead, he locks his jaw, he sets forward, and tells Rey that the Jedi must end. Because if the Jedi way brought them all to this point, he would have nothing to do with it whatsoever. Now, when Rey confronts him about that night with Ben Solo, Luke relays what happens, but as we saw in The Last Jedi, continue to focus the blame on himself, rather than emphasizing Snoke's influence and how it affected Ben's behavior, as well as his vision of what actually transpired with Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, killing Han Solo, his father, and basically how that affected him in that moment. So this is a point where Luke's self-loathing and his own guilt hurts him, even though he's trying to convey what happened, what really happened, in contrast to what Kylo Ren had been telling Rey. But, like I said, the message didn't come across. So Rey is disgusted, and her and Luke get into a fight. Now people say, well, how the heck did Luke lose that fight with Rey? He's a Jedi Master. He's like the Grand Master Luke here. But you got to think about it. So, when Rey fights Luke, she wins because he wants to lose. He doesn't want to go. Luke shuts himself. He shut himself off from the Force. And he was prepared to let the Jedi die there with him on that island. So, yeah, he fought with her, but he basically threw in the towel, and he let her win. So, I know there was a big uproar about that, but it was kind of, he gave it a little bit here and there to kind of put up, the auspices that, he's actually putting forth effort, but he really he let Rey win because he just wanted to die. Seeing Rey leave to try and return Kylo Ren to the light, someone she barely knew, reminded Luke of the day that he learned that Vader was his father. It reminded him of the moment he decided to attempt to save his father from the grasp of the Emperor, and it lit a spark within him that he had purposely hid for a long time. Luke knew that he could not avoid his destiny. It was time for Luke to act. However, he was a day late and $1 short, as his X-Wing could no longer fly. Luke decides to attempt to assist the Resistance by projecting himself across the galaxy. When he does, there is a lot of symbolism that fits what this means for an Episode 9 return. His Force-projected meeting with Leia is where the two come to a mutual acceptance of what is to come. Basically, in my theory, or if I were writing it, how I would see this happen. Basically, it's an acceptance of that vision that Luke and Leia had. When he hands Leia the dice, this is a direct reference to his best friend Han Solo, who would ignore any odds and who had laid down his life in an attempt to redeem his son. Luke and Leia, and that moment, vow to honor Han Solo's sacrifice. They're going to roll the dice and risk losing it all in an attempt to defy the odds to bring back Ben to the light. So now we kind of move over, like we said, this is the point where Luke has Force projected himself, to the planet to save the Resistance and his sister. And this is when he moves out and walks out to confront the First Order forces. It's here that we see, Kylo Ren overreact and order everyone to fire on Luke Skywalker's position. Now, if you remember, so from my, if this was going the way I would write this, rationale, Snoke basically, who is now inhabiting General Hux's body, basically is watching his apprentice's failure in contempt. He's completely disappointed with what Kylo Ren's doing. And you could kind of see that in General Hux's face and his body language. He's looking at Kylo Ren like, what the heck are you doing there? So anywho, now Snoke himself is able to see through the ruse of Luke Skywalker's Force projection. And after a bit, he's finally has enough. He points out basically that the firing should stop. He's basically telling his apprentice, all right, that's enough. It's enough now. But obviously, the next thing that everyone sees is Luke walking out unharmed. And then Snoke watches as Kylo then is easily goaded out into combat, delaying the pursuit of the Resistance. I mean, they had the Resistance. The doors were open. There was nothing that they could do, the Resistance could do to stop them. But instead of keeping the eye on the ball, keeping the big picture in perspective, he is focused on Luke here. And it doesn't even, and Kylo Ren doesn't even recognize what's going on. So the Supreme Leader says, all right, I'm going to let this play out. Basically in hopes that it will teach his pupil a lesson. During the fight scene, quote unquote, this is where Luke tells Kylo that if he strikes him down, he'll never get rid of him. Now, take that with what I've used as a rationale and a means to bring Luke back. This is Luke telling him, hey, this is a direct foreshadow to the fact that he will return, and not just as a Force ghost. I mean, Kylo doesn't really get that, but Luke, is basically telling him what's going to happen. Now, when Luke disappears, both in front of Kylo Ren, and then becomes one with the Force on Ahch-To, you notice that Leia and Rey have a moment, right? So now one of the things, you look at that and Leia basically states that Luke Skywalker is at peace, and yeah, she's somewhat sad, right? But at the same time, she's at peace herself, which is odd for somebody who just lost her brother. I mean, that kind of boggles your mind right at that point. It didn't even make sense to me when I watched it the first time. That's what I'm saying. If you take my kind of my rationale and plot points of bringing Luke back, then this would actually make sense. She's at peace because she knows what's going to happen. She already knows what she needs to do. She knows she's going to go and bring her brother back. And she knows that that act will eventually lead to Kylo Ren turning back to the light side. And that's what she wants. That's what's important to her. Okay? So, in that context, she knows that she basically is going to be the catalyst that'll bring back everything that they need to confront the First Order and Snoke. Now, she doesn't know necessarily that Snoke is still alive, but she knows that this is going to bring her son back. That's all she cares about. So, the galaxy will have a legend to build upon. Rey is going to have a Jedi Master who will be able to teach her. And then along with the books that she swiped from the temple before leaving Ahch-To. If you remember that, Luke was going to burn the temple or the tree that had the texts, the Jedi texts in there, and then basically Master Yoda zapped it with Force lightning, exercising his ability to interact from beyond the veil to the physical realm, right? Kind of like what we talked about earlier, right? So she has those books. So now you have Rey, you'll have Luke, you'll have the books, you'll have a chance. There will be hope for the future. And so Leia realizes this, and she's at peace with this because she knows that most importantly, throughout that whole process, her son will be redeemed. Okay, so at this point, I'm sure now you're wondering, how would we make this happen in episode 9? Because our beloved Carrie Fisher passed away. Okay? Tragedy. Alright? So how would we actually make this happen? So here's how I think we could handle this, and how I think this is viable for episode 9. So the way I'd do it is, I'd have the opening crawl pick up from where they left, describing the dire situation that the Resistance is in. They basically just narrowly escaped the First Order, and the survivors are concerned that no one came to their rescue when they sent out their request for aid in the movie The Last Jedi. All right, so they sent out an all points bulletin. Hey, we need help. Nobody came, so that's a concern, right? Because now they feel alone. Okay. It would then state that when asked where they should go, that Leia tells the crew that they're going to go to Ahch-To, alright? So the location of the Jedi Temple, okay? And so all of the Resistance is pretty much taken by surprise at that request, but this is General Leia, so they set course. Millennium Falcon sets course, boom, and they head to Ahch-To, landing on the island of the first Jedi Temple. Now, When they get there, I would have the camera basically focused on Rey, and basically you hear and perhaps see a blurred image of Leia leaving the Millennium Falcon, instructing everyone to remain on board. Maybe during this scene you can hear Chewie growl in protest, but Leia calms him down as she departs down the ramp. The Resistance, the survivors are discussing options, in the back. But eventually, Rey, Finn, Poe should sit down kind of away from the rest, kind of to discuss what's going on. You could have BB-8 warbling along with R2, back and forth, making repairs to the Falcon and checking up on the systems. In the meantime, Rey sits down and decides to reach out with the Force to see what Leia is up to. Okay, so this is while the other folks, Finn, Poe, the other guys are, kind of talking back and forth about what to do. So she sits down, arms and legs crossed, focusing on the Force, and you see the camera focus on Rey as she sits there on the ground, eyes closed, deeply concentrating. Now, Rey's getting the attention of the others in the room as she reaches out in the Force and begins to describe what Leia is doing. It's kind of what was on the mind of the other people around. It's kind of driving some of that conversation. But now she's actually, through the Force, watching what Leia is doing and where she's going. So everybody kind of shuts up and kind of starts to pay attention to what she's saying. As she delves deeper in the Force, she begins to hear voices. And the voices that Rey hears are that of Leia calling out to Luke, and Luke responding. So, in this point, she would reach out so powerfully that now she can hear that conversation, and think of it kind of like, it's almost like a seance kind of thing, but kind of like she sits there and she's telepathically linking herself in a way, not really linking, but connecting to Leia, and basically audibly speaking what Leia is saying. Okay, so now the rest of the guys, they can't hear what Luke is saying, but they can hear through Rey's voice. Okay, because it wouldn't be Leia's voice, but it would be Rey's voice relaying what Leia is saying, as Luke is questioning her basically about whether or not she's sure she wants to go through with this. Finn and Poe stop talking. I mean, they're done with that, and they are really listening now to what's going on, and they're kind of giving each other the look back and forth. The audience, as us in the audience, we'll hear Luke's voice clearly, and then we'll hear Rey's voice. Perhaps I think maybe you can do kind of like a voiceover with maybe some of Leia's voice mixed in with Rey's. I'm sure we can do that in this day and age, and we hear it as a response. When Rey finally understands what is about to happen, because she's trying to figure this all out too, she's trying to process this, she breaks her meditative trance that she was in, and she leaps up, and she's starts running out of the Falcon. Finn and Poe then, at first attempt to stop her, but then, they're just more up in arms about what's going on. I mean, she bursts free. She doesn't even let them get in her way. And then, obviously they don't want to get in her way too much either. So she's going full tilt. You see her running, out of the Falcon. The camera pans to her running to the spot where Jedi Master Luke gave himself to the Force, where we left off, on that cliff. Okay? When she gets there, she sees a hooded figure kneeling down. Now, Leia, when she departed, she she was wearing a hood and a robe as well, just to kind of make things kind of match up here. Now, Rey then, expecting it to be Leia, leaps forward yelling, "Wait, we need you." And then at that point, you can have it where Luke stands, turns around, takes the hood off of his head, and says, "More than you realize, kid. More than you realize." With Luke back, obviously the director, J.J. Abrams can do whatever he wants, but after that, I would see a fade to the First Order with Kylo Ren assembling the Knights of Ren and trying to get a better assessment of the big picture status of what's going on with the First Order. It would be the business of assessing losses, gauging threats, etc. He'd be barking orders to have everyone search for the whereabouts of the Millennium Falcon, even going to the same lengths that Darth Vader did by bringing in bounty hunters. That way we can add a couple more characters, some more interesting plot points. All the while, though, Snoke, under the guise of General Hux, begins to work in the background to reassert his authority. Now, Snoke sensed what happened. He knew that situation with Luke was a ruse, right? So he also picks up a disturbance in the Force at the moment when Leia exchanges herself for Luke, basically bringing him back, And it's in that moment, Snoke doesn't know exactly what happens, but it's that moment that he would realize that his nemesis Luke Skywalker is most likely still alive. So Snoke then begins to prepare his own plans to bring himself, Kylo Ren, Luke Skywalker, and Rey together. Now, the way I would handle that is that he's doing this in hopes of killing Jedi Master Luke and using the emotion of the moment to try and turn Rey to the dark side and actually rid himself of his failed apprentice Kylo Ren. So that's kind of what I would see as Snoke's motivation, and what he's trying to accomplish is basically behind the scenes reasserting his authority, planning, and trying to get this group of folks together so that way he can off Luke, take care of that, kill Kylo Ren because he's a failure, and then turn Rey and use her as his new Sith apprentice. Honestly, Episode 9 can go in so many directions, but I would like to see Luke and the others in a position where they're traveling around the galaxy, rounding up aid in their fight against the First Order. They could basically encounter Lando. They could encounter, whoever. That maybe they encounter, some of the people from the Clone Wars that we know, that we all learn to love as characters. Maybe that happens. I mean, could you imagine encountering some of the heroes from Rebels, or from the Clone Wars? That would be amazing. So maybe they go around and they start picking up these people, these other heroes. And then during that journey, I would like to see Luke train Rey, and also recognize that Finn has Force potential as well, right? So I think he has a part to play in this, and I don't think he should just be relegated to being, a coward. I mean, he did confront it. He was about to try and destroy the canon that the First Order brought, and he was robbed of his sacrifice. But I see him as having some potential, as well in the Force. And Luke, learning from the lessons of the past, decides to be active again. He doesn't let those past failures shackle him into that state of inactivity anymore. So we'll see Rey and Finn, who I would like to see their bond grow more in Episode 9, both learning together from Grandmaster Luke. okay? And you watch through that training together, good times, you see tough, funny stuff. You could have some funny situations go, while they're training, just kind of like the same things that happen, kind of with Luke and Yoda, and their interactions. But now you have both of them, and then you can see that training together under the tutelage of Luke helps to foster their relationship, and I'd like to see that personally. Also, I'd like to see Poe step up to the plate, with the loss of Leia. I mean, Leia was, he revered Leia, and for her to be gone, is an extreme blow, okay? So I see him taking that loss and all that transpired in The Last Jedi and using that to kind of temper that zealous nature. And that doesn't mean that he doesn't, he's not a hero. He doesn't want to get out there and destroy the First Order. But I think it's a point where I think that this happening basically gives him some wisdom, and takes him and gives him a little bit of vector for his thrust. So that way, he's just not going off in a direction. He's actually thinking strategically, rather than completely tactically, which is what we saw in the Last Jedi. And then I would like to see a final showdown with an epic battle between Poe leading the new rebellion fleet against the First Order fleet, and have that in parallel with a lightsaber force power bowcaster blasting battle between Rey, Finn, Chewbacca, Grandmaster Luke, any of the other heroes that we want to insert from Rebels or from the Clone Wars, versus, now the reason I say bring them into it's because now they're going to go versus the Knights of Ren, Kylo Ren, and eventually Snoke himself, who will reveal himself, who is currently inhabiting General Hux's body. Okay, so how Abrams would choose to do that, is to find, it's entirely dependent on the direction they want to go with, but to me, this would make for an amazing story arc for the Skywalker story. Okay, redemption again, even redemption past the point that you think redemption could be possible. Like to see it happen. Like to see the Skywalkers, end in a fitting way, maintaining the balance of the Force, maintaining good, not besmirching the Skywalker name, but also being that piece that opens up a future for the new characters. A good transition, a heroic and amazing transition, versus kind of what we have right now, which is nobody knows what, because the Skywalkers are all done except for Kylo, at least as far as we know. Okay, so anyway, I think that this would be a fun way, to kind of fix a lot of the problems that people had with the first two movies and bring some kind of cohesiveness to the story. And remember, this trilogy, it's more than a trilogy. It's but this saga is the Skywalker saga, starting with Anakin and the prequels, to Luke Skywalker redeeming his father, to Kylo Ren and what happens to Luke and Leia, and all of that. So I think this series deserves a good ending, and their characters' memories need to be remembered in a positive way. We need to remember Han Solo's sacrifice. This would do that. It would give Han Solo's sacrifice more weight, being that tipping point, that and that bonding point between Luke and Leia, the way I described it. Luke will be back. He can take care of business and help redeem Kylo in the end. And then Leia, her point and her part in this play, and this is integral, because she's the one that sacrifices herself for her son. What a powerful message. She does that to save her own son, that she would lay her life down. I mean, so anyway, I think this is it has a lot of possibility. Obviously, they already say they have a script together and whatnot, but I think that this would help to basically, you save Luke. He can come back in episode 9. B, you save Snoke. He can come back in episode 9. You save the integrity of Luke Skywalker and his legacy. And you also you save the integrity of Snoke. So that way he's not seen as some kind of a joke, a punk there. You know what I mean? He basically, that's the way he went out too. So this, what I presented here basically tries to handle both their physical death and then the assassination of their characters. Well, I hope you enjoyed this fun exercise in how to bring back Luke and Snoke, and how it all could make basically the Force Awakens and the Last Jedi make sense continuity-wise, flowing into that last movie. Anyway, thanks for watching. Like I said, this is my first shot at doing videos here, and I look forward to hearing your ideas. I'd like to hear your ideas in the comments about my theory on how to basically bring Luke and Snoke back, and see what you think below. Maybe you guys have some other ideas as well, and I'd love to see them. So if you enjoyed it, click like or subscribe to my channel below. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to fellow YouTubers who were the inspiration for me doing this in the first place. I want to give a special shout out to SC Reviews, Geeks and Gamers, Stephanie Janisek, Vivian Fonseca, Heathen James, World Class BSers, I Live in Hyperspace, Abu Nas, and there's a whole bunch more. You guys are all doing a great job, and I appreciate your inspiration for doing this. I'll also put links to their pages below. Anyway, thanks for spending this time with us and doing a little theory craft here and how to save these beloved characters. Alright? Well, you take care, and may the Force be with you.